Libby Jackson. I've worked in the field of human spaceflight for many, many years now, and I'm going to tell you today a little bit about the International Space Station, about what it does, why it's there, what's useful, and how you can see it, which is really exciting. The International Space Station is a unique, amazing, wonderful scientific laboratory. It orbits not very far away. It's only 400 kilometers or so above the surface of the Earth. So that's really not so far. It's sort of a little bit like perhaps the distance between London and York, something like that. And it travels around the Earth once every 90 minutes. Now, because it's in space, because it's orbiting at 17,500 miles an hour, everything in it is what's called in free fall, where you can't feel the effects of Earth's gravity. Now, that's not to say gravity's not there, it's not disappeared. 400 kilometers up, the gravity field is pretty similar to what it is where we are here on the surface of the Earth, sitting here being pulled down into our seats by it. But as I say, because you're going so fast, because everything is constantly falling towards the Earth and just missing it all the time because it's going sideways so much, it's in orbit, you can't feel the effects of gravity. Now, the same thing can happen here on Earth. If you've ever gone on a roller coaster and felt your stomach lift and just lifted out your seat for a moment at the top of a roller coaster, you've been balancing the forces of gravity by the roller coaster. You've been in microgravity. You can also get in an aeroplane and be weightless for periods of 30 seconds or so, because the plane flies in these parabolas up and down and up and down. And what's happening there is a bit like what happens when you kick a football. Now, you could try this in your garden. If you can get a small ball and put it inside a big ball, if somehow you've got a way of opening up a beach ball and putting it in, you can kick that ball and you'll see it fly in a parabola, up and down. It's under the effect of gravity. You can feel the effect of gravity. But if you look at the little ball inside it, you'll see that it just floats along, that it's floating in the middle of the football as it goes up and comes down. That's exactly the same thing that's happening to all the astronauts and all the experiments on the International Space Station. And so what happens on the International Space Station is fantastic science. There are over 200 experiments that take place every 6 months on the International Space Station, and they range from all kinds of different areas, through all kinds of different areas. We look at what happens to plants, to biology. We can build different materials in space because you haven't got gravity arranging the particles in different ways. And we look at what happens to the human body. Human body is really particularly interesting for all of us, because we all hopefully are going to get old one day. And as we get older, our bones and our muscles and other parts of our bodies deteriorate and get weaker. And this is the same thing that happens to astronauts in space. Basically, they go to space and they get old really, really quickly. Their bones and their muscles get weaker. Now, they get weaker because they are floating. The bones and the muscles don't need to work as hard and the body adapts. And if scientists can understand the changes that are happening to the human bodies in space, and these otherwise very healthy, very fit young individuals, they can start to understand, and are starting to understand, the processes that happen to all of us as we get older. It's really hard sometimes to go and do research on frail 80-year-olds. It wouldn't be right. And they've had a long life with lots of different things, and we don't always know why particular things are happening to them. But if you can study very healthy astronauts in space and just watch what happens to their bones and muscles, you can learn all sorts of things. So that's what happens with astronauts. You can do the same sort of thing for plants. As I say, we can grow materials. The space station is also a great platform for looking out into the universe, or back down to the Earth, because it's this big structure. It's got these giant solar panels that are collecting the sun's rays and turning them into electricity. So it's sort of a ready-made platform where you can go and bolt on an observing system, something that looks out into the solar system. There's an experiment called the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer on board, which is doing just that, or something that's looking down at Earth. There's an experiment at the minute from the European Space Agency on there called ASIM, which is studying what happens in the upper atmosphere to thunderstorms, this kind of thing, electrical signals Thunderstorms, as well as sending lightning down, can send sparks of things up into the atmosphere. And these are really hard to study, but this instrument on the space station is going to look at them. And understanding that helps all of us, because it affects how it happens with our electrical grid. We see these changes. It can knock out, I say, electric grids all over the place. So it's a thing that scientists are looking to understand. So I say the International Space Station, this great scientific laboratory, it's had people on it for nearly 20 years. The first parts of it were built in 1998, and slowly we put it together piece at a time over the years, from people all around the world, engineers all around the world, building these modules that then came together in space having never met before. It was an amazing engineering feat. And the first crew who stayed there continuously, the first people arrived in 1998, 1999, but since 2000, we have had continuous human occupation. One crew has handed over to another, for 20 years. And in November this year, we'll be celebrating 20 years of crew on the International Space Station. Phenomenal achievement. So anyone young today, anyone at school, you have had people in space for your whole life. And even me, now pushing 40, there's been pretty much people in space, even my whole life, because before the International Space Station, there was Mir, which was this Russian space station, and that had people on it for many years, right through the 80s into the 90s. There wasn't quite a handover from Mir to the space station, but there have been people learning how to live and work in space now for nearly 40 years, and that is a phenomenal achievement. The International Space Station, it's a huge thing. It's about 100 meters long and 100 meters wide. And as I say, it's got 8 giant solar panels collecting all the sun's energy, not all the sun's energy, but it's collecting sun's energy, turning it into electricity to keep the space station powered. As well as the electricity, is also a really kind of green place in some ways, because we try and recycle all the air and all the water. And a lot of the technology that we have to develop for the space station has implications and benefits to us here on Earth, as we're learning how to make our water processes more efficient, how we want to recycle things. It's the ultimate sort of closed loop system. It's really hard to send rubbish back. You have to send it back to Earth. Really hard to get water up there, because you've got to launch it up on a rocket, so we want to recycle as much water as possible. And of course we want to use all our electricity as efficiently as possible too. So it's really interesting from that point of view. But now these giant solar panels are the things that mean that you can see the International Space Station with your very own eyes. And now is a great time to go and start trying to spot it in the sky. And you can see it at night. And you can see it at night either in the hours just after sunset or just before sunrise if you like to get up early. And the reason that you can see it only at these times when it's flying overhead is because what you're looking at when you see the space station fly over is reflected sunlight. It's the same reason that you can see planets in the sky. Now the stars we see in the sky, they're just like our sun, long way away, and directly emitting light that we see with our eyes. But the planets in the space station and the moon reflect sunlight. That's why stars twinkle and planets don't. So if you know when to look, and you can go online to places like NASA's Spot the Space Station page or Heavens Above, you can look up and you can see the space station. And as I say, you've got to see it when it's light overhead and dark on the Earth. That's why it's only before or after sunset. So you can imagine that during the daylight, our daylight, the space station is going overhead, but it's so bright we can't see it in the sky the same way that we can't see stars in the sky during the time. And at night, when it's the middle of the night here, you can't see the space station if it flies overhead, because the sunlight is getting blocked by the Earth. It's the nighttime, and it's very low. As I said, 400 kilometers, really not very high in the sky, so it's basically nighttime in space as well. But just before and just after the sun sets, you can imagine you've got the sun shining on the Earth, and this going over the top, and there's that little bit between the surface of the Earth and where the space station is. And when the space station is still in sunlight, because it's just that little bit higher, and the Earth is in darkness, that's when you can see it. It's a little bit like if you imagine being at the top of a mountain, And the top of the mountain, the sunlight will stay up there more than it will down in the valleys. You can be in the valley and be in the dark, you still see the sunlight on the top of the mountain. It's the same thing that's happening with the solar panels on the space station, and that's why you can see the International Space Station when it flies overhead. So go check out Spot the Station, Heavens Above. It's a great time now to go and see it. Wave at the humans who are up there. Think of all the great science experiments they are doing. And look out for that anniversary as well in November, and just think of all the fantastic things that happen on the International Space Station.